Okay, my name is Joan B. I'm 63 years of age. I live in Nassau County, New York, USA. I'm a social worker who has a private practice in which I do psychotherapy with a number of clients with different psychological situations and disorders. Much of my work focuses around people who are in grief, etc. However, the case that I'm going to speak about right now involves a situation in which a client of mine who was relatively new to my practice, approximately 2 or 3 months, came to me because of issues of sexuality. He's a gay man who had some difficulties with his partner. In the course of our discussions, what he told me is that he also has very serious financial problems. And even though he has periodically, over the course of his life, had a lot of money, he was at this point in his life in a very serious financial situation. He was working in a delicatessen, I think, cooking and making a meager salary, and had serious debts as well as problems with his partner. And he revealed to me that he was considering stealing a car, that he thought he would be able to, he had figured out how he was going to be able to sell the car, and he knew exactly what kind of car he was going to steal. It presented an ethical dilemma for me because the Code of Ethics in Social Work, which is my discipline, does not necessarily specify what one is to do in situations like this. It does specify that we have the mandate to report any homicidal and suicidal behaviors or anticipated behaviors to authorities. But this is not a homicide. It was not a suicide. And the person who would be most upset by this was the owner of the car, who at this point could not be identified. And so I was in a quandary about whether I had any legal obligation to report a crime that had not been committed. In addition, the values of social work that are in operation for the most part are those of self-determination and confidentiality. And so I certainly had an obligation to keep confidentiality and to support self-determination, which in this case would have been harmful to an other. And the resolution was that I asked him if he knew the consequences of his behavior. That was perhaps the only way that I could influence the situation. And he said he did realize that if he were caught either in the act of stealing or in selling the car, that he would be in serious trouble. And he knew that. And so I said to him that he really had an obligation to consider the impact of his behavior, and that in some respects I did not necessarily want to know whether or not he had stolen the car. He left my office and came back a week later and in fact had not stolen the car. He had reached some kind of resolution with his partner, and that was more the pressing issue than the financial side of it, and so he did not steal the car. However, the ethical dilemma still remained and remains in my thinking as to what would have been the appropriate action for me. What I did was to explain that there was consequence and to explore his understanding of consequence, and left it at that. And that was the situation of a struggle between self-determination, confidentiality, and any legal implications that might have accrued. It did not come to pass. Nevertheless, the dilemma in some ways still remains a dilemma in my thinking.